Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope y'all can hear me well. Yeah, welcome, really welcome. We're so glad to have you all. It's been just a little over 3 weeks since George Floyd was killed by a white Minneapolis police officer who kneeled on his neck for nearly 9 minutes while he died. In the wake of the civil uprising in response to the murder of George Floyd, yet another Black person at the hands of police, many people are looking for ways to respond to the grief, rage, and despair they're seeing and feeling. The protests against ongoing police brutality toward Black Americans highlights both the institutional racism of the criminal justice system and the economic disparities facing people of color in this country. A long and deep history of racism in this country that has been consciously and unconsciously built into the core of our economic and social systems has brought us here. The huge economic, social, and health disparities that we see today between Black and white Americans are no accident. They are the direct result of centuries-old practices in the US that have helped create opportunity and wealth for the white majority while largely bypassing or straight up blocking communities of color. Those policies range from the nearly 250 years of uncompensated and forced labor through slavery to federal housing policies that blocked home buyers of color by redlining and through race-based covenants, and a slew of discriminatory and exclusionary policies and practices put in place at critical junctures, post-slavery, in the years after the Great Depression and World War II. These are policies and systems that either limit the ability of households of color from building wealth or strip away what little wealth they might have. And surprise, surprise, but things have not been getting better. Prosperity Now's publication, Road to Zero Wealth and Running in Place, examined Federal Reserve data over a 33-year period to understand the growing racial wealth divide, and found that between 1983 and 2016, the wealth of median Black households decreased by an astounding 51%, while median white families saw a 33% increase. And so in 1983, the net worth of white households was 8 times higher than that of Black households. And in 2016, it was 13 times higher. Without leveling the playing field, it will take 242 years for the average Black family to reach the level of wealth white families own today. So economics was the reason that Black people were brought to this country. Slavery laid the foundation for the building of white wealth in America. And now, over 400 years of oppression later, we continue to clearly see the results of living in a capitalist system that relies on the disposability of Black and brown bodies to build wealth. It's a system built on the notion of white supremacy that creates opportunity for white families while systematically pushing people of color to the margins, excluding them, disrespecting them, and treating their bodies as disposable. These are systems that deny them housing, medical care, human dignity, and a say in our government. Household wealth is the buffer families need when faced with unexpected economic shocks like a lost job or a broken down car or a global pandemic. And wealth is also the capital available to families to take advantage of economic opportunities that benefit the next generation, like buying a home, saving for college, or investing. And ultimately, wealth is the difference between a family maintaining and strengthening their economic status or flailing in a downward spiral of economic insecurity. In this cultural moment, seeing the widespread global protest, I and many believe that we may be really seeing a window of awakening, a mass shift in understanding and perception that may at last have the momentum to support real and meaningful change. What kind of a solution born in this moment would address these unjust and destructive systems? What does economic liberation look like for Black people in America? I'm Malaika Mapalala. I'm a partner and advisor at Natural Investments, and we're a socially responsible investment firm that has long committed to addressing racial inequity and supporting our clients and moving money in ways that directly benefit communities of color. I'm honored to be here today with you and my colleagues and our guests to engage in this conversation, ask these questions, and look at solutions. My colleagues, Kate Poole and Tiffany Brown of Cordata Capital, will share a range of strategies to support racial justice. And then we'll hear from Ebony Perkins about self-help credit unions work, and Sarah Loving about better banking options. In order to support Black liberation and building Black economic power, capital needs to be channeled to the people and communities themselves that are living the results of oppression and ensure that they are in the leadership roles to determine needs and make decisions about how that capital flows. In short, we've got to shift power to the people and communities most impacted by systemic racism, and we must share the wealth. We have to acknowledge and directly address the racial wealth gap, which limits opportunities for Black people. And like as just one example, in business development, our current system expects that early stages of starting businesses should be funded by entrepreneurs themselves with support from friends and family, a place where we just saw that there is a 13-fold difference between resources available to Black families and white. And then later, venture capital is supposed to, it's often sought to buoy young businesses as they reach growth stage. And again, we see a stark racial disparity in that a mere 1% of venture capital has been directed toward Black founders. So today we'll be focusing on ways that you can engage to help shift this unjust, racially biased economic paradigm. And we'll hear about actions you can take as an individual and as part of a collective to support organizations, projects, businesses, and movements that are moving money into the hands of Black communities, entrepreneurs, and community leaders. We'll underscore the key support needed. So that's focus on Black-led initiatives, access to capital, business development, home ownership, and community wealth building. And then at the end, we'll definitely make time to answer questions from you, our viewers, and engage in some discussion before we close. Given the strength of these entrenched structures and systems that have been in place for generations, it's very clear that intentional, direct action to repair, restore, and uplift Black communities is required. We need to be able to envision and create a whole continuum of alternatives and solutions that center reparation and reconciliation rather than the status quo with its tools of retribution and vengeance. We want a world where, as a community, we embrace our most vulnerable, meet their needs, heal their wounds, and honor their dignity.
Thank you, Malika, for that powerful framing. I wanted to offer an invitation for folks to come back to their bodies, to land, to take a few breaths together. This work is about understanding, and it's in our heads, and it's also in our bodies and our embodied practices. So I want to invite people to feel your feet on the floor, on the ground. What was happening to your body when you were hearing about these frameworks, about white supremacy, about the violence in our country? Is your shoulder, neck tight? Is your jaw clenched? Allow yourself to notice if there's sadness or grief coming up in your throat or in your heart. We're going to take a minute in silence to land in our bodies, allow ourselves to feel the grief of this moment. And I'm going to share some of the names, and we'll sit in silence together to honor and feel the loss of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, and countless others. And I also wanted to name Black trans woman Dominique Remy Fells, who was killed this week in Philadelphia. So let that sit for a minute. Thank you for taking a minute, some time towards landing. We know that a lot of you have already been showing up in many ways for Black liberation, for this movement, for racial justice over the past few weeks. And so we wanted to kind of get a quick snapshot of how you've been showing up. So you can fill out this poll, kind of like, so we can get a little read. You could put in specific actions you're taking in the chat, but we know that many of you are already moving money, looking to support Black business owners. Yeah. Thanks for giving us this peek. Yeah. Multiple choice is allowed. Yeah, so you can show up the multiple ways that you've been showing up. This is beautiful. It's wonderful to see it come in and to feel the work that's happening as a community that we've already been participating in. Looks like 70% of folks have already moved money to Black-led nonprofits. Looks like over half of y'all are supporting Black-owned businesses. And yeah, a couple y'all, 12% of y'all are trying to figure out what comes next. And that's why you're here. So we're so glad you're here. And I am so glad to get to introduce my business partner, Tiffany Brown. We're both natural investments advisors, and together we founded Cordata Capital. And she's going to share more about this framework of how we invest in Black liberation. So I'll share my screen. Let's see, where is she? She muted, unmute.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Brown. I'm based in Marin, in California. And as Kate mentioned, we came together in 2018 to form Cordata Capital, Investment with a Backbone. We both have a background in donor organizing, working with radical young people with wealth through resource generation. And the language within the organizing community of resource generation is deeply anti-capitalist. And we were seeking to create a firm that mirrored these beautiful sort of like anti-capitalist, deeply committed to racial justice language that had been so much a part of our organizing work. So the language, just as an example within resource generation, is that they're a community of people dedicated to the redistribution of land, wealth, and power. So in order to meet their radical spirits, we created Cordata Capital. We joined Natural Investments as partners to support the infrastructure of our business. Just structurally to explain, we have our investment advisory practice, and then we run a 9-month program for people with inherited wealth. So in building out our firm, we developed what our backbone is, and it's these 3 key values. So we have an explicit commitment to racial justice. We understand that the history of our economic system is rooted in stolen land and stolen labor. Also, around the time that we were developing our business, I had been living in Boston, and there was a study that came out in 2015 that that was about the racial wealth divide. And the study showed that the median white family had $247,000 of wealth as compared to the $8 that Black families had. So when we think about what it is to be an anti-capitalist investment advisory firm that's committed to bridging the racial wealth divide, we don't believe that people should continue to build their wealth on the backs of people of color. So our clients come in at low to 0% interest on the returns of their investments. Another shortcut, this is, I feel like kind of a no-brainer, but when we're thinking about our investment strategy, one of the first things that we always do is like look at who's in leadership at the investments. So if there are not a lot of Black and brown faces, we're not super inclined to invest in them. And if we decide that we will invest, we make sure that we have a lot of lengthy conversations about what the commitment is and what the journey is going to be of that institution. And the final piece is just kind of like an under the hood of Chordata Capital, which is that Kate hasn't shared much of her story yet, but is a young person with wealth. And so when we were thinking about the development of our business and that Kate's work is to redistribute her wealth, well, me as a Black woman who is working middle class, I'm trying to build my wealth. And so we developed a pay structure that actually took that into account. The second piece of our backbone is shared risk and accountability. I think it's really important for any business to be in solidarity with who it serves. And so we're really clear that we couldn't be who we are without the work of those that are building the solidarity economy. And we'll mention some of those investments later. We also compensate all of our presenters for their time. As I mentioned, we have this program that we run, which is not an industry standard. And also we chose 3 people from our midst who are working in the solidarity economy to keep us accountable. And we offer a lot of transparency about the way that we move as a firm. The final part of our backbone is bringing our whole selves. And this actually feels like a political act for us. We strive to embody all of who we are in all areas of our work. And then we also create space for others to do the same. I feel that it's gonna take, you know, all we got, our love, our spirit, and yeah, just all the ways that we need to show up to create a different path. So that's our backbone. And now I'll pass it to Kate to talk about the 6 ways to invest in Black liberation.
Thanks, Tiffany. I think as a part of this moment, Tiffany and I were really excited to share 6 ways that we are investing in Black liberation that are part of the backbone that we've built as a business. And so we created this article that I'll share a link with y'all, and it's highlighting these 6 ways and also sharing some of Tiffany's wisdom and brilliance around how she's looking at this moment that we're in, this moment of uprising and revolution for Black liberation. And I think an important piece of it for me as like a wealthy white woman and showing up to this movement is lifting up the leadership and the brilliance of Black women and really like leaning into supporting Tiffany as my brilliant business partner.
Cool. So it was interesting when we first were developing this piece, it was the 5 ways to invest in Black liberation. But then once Kate and I were like re-tinkering, editing this piece, we felt that actually the very first way to invest in Black liberation is to center the leadership of Black women who embody the loving warrior stance and are building the solidarity economy. And we thought about all of the Black women that are a part of our circle, a part of our work. My mentor, Lily Allen, our dear colleague, Jessica Norwood, Amaka Agbo, who is one of the advisors I mentioned, as is Jessica. Anyway, so many beautiful Black women. And the piece that I'd like to say about this is that there's a trend of using the images, the quotes, proximity to Blackness to prop up institutions or individuals. That's downright disgusting, and it's happening all the time. But we center the leadership of Black women in our work. We feel that their intersectional analysis of being doubly marginalized has infinite wisdom, and we continue to be overlooked and disrespected. So a huge area of our work is actually bringing Black women to the center, and that is how we move as a business. Oh, this is mine too. Yeah, second piece, move money, move that money. I'd like to highlight a couple of different ways that people can move money to Black-led institutions like Hope Credit Union in the Mississippi Delta, where we've been building deep relationship and are so grateful for them as an anchor institution in the South, working with the unbanked and the underbanked. Also, major shout out to Runway Project, who is partnered with Berkshire Bank. This is the work of our friend Jessica Norwood, where they have a friends and family capital CD. And what that does is work to bridge the racial wealth divide by offering friends and family capital to Black entrepreneurs. And we mentioned in this slide to give and invest. And oftentimes in our work, Kate and I talk about what's the long game. So we need investment capital, but if we want the solidarity economy and to actually like invest in the ultimate outcome of Black liberation, it's also going to take philanthropic dollars.
And so give and give more money on top of that. It sounded like a lot of you are already giving money. A piece I wanted to add is it's so critical that folks are moving money to bail funds to get people out. And also the heart learns what the hands do. That's a quote from Movement Generation that I really love. And so in addition to fighting the bad and getting people out of jail and prison, we also need to be building the new, building the solidarity economy, building the economic infrastructure that's going to allow Black people and Black communities to thrive. And so an invitation for y'all that are doing giving is to match the donations that you're making to bail funds to the Black economic infrastructure that's going to allow people to have healthy jobs, allow them to access the capital that they need to thrive. And this other piece that I've seen is this invitation around making multi-year commitments. If there's a flood of resources into an organization, but they don't know if those resources are going to continue, it's hard for them to hire new organizers to figure out their programming. And so it's really powerful to make 3, 4, 5-year commitments to these Black-led organizations working for justice so that they can count on you in the future as a donor, and so that they can expand their work for the long haul, because this is not just about this moment. This is like a long haul fight that we're in that we need to fund. Another piece for Tiffany and I that's been really important is divesting from Wall Street. Tiffany mentioned, I'll just share a little bit about my story, and I'm happy to share more with folks after, but I inherited wealth. I inherited 2 trust funds totaling 2.1 million when I was in my early 20s, and I was doing this work organizing for racial justice, and I needed to understand what did it look like for me to be in integrity, to have this access to wealth that I knew was accumulated through violence and extraction, because all wealth in this country, especially white wealth, has been accumulated through violence and extraction. How could I take that wealth and return it through reparations, through giving, and through investing in the solidarity economy? And so it's been really important to me to move all of my money out of Wall Street, because Tiffany and I, we believe that the best strategy for people with wealth is to move their money out of Wall Street into that new economic infrastructure that we need in the solidarity economy. And this is tied back to getting clear about like where your money comes from, the money that you have access to, and what repair can look like. I want to highlight a project, and I'll share the slide doc in the chat right after this so people can go and click links. I'm not sure if you're able to click links right now. I don't think you are, but this 400 years of inequality timeline, there's a really beautiful resource, reparationsforslavery.com, and it offers some tools for people to trace their family lineage. And so I just painted these broad strokes. I think that I know that if you're inheriting investments and those investments are in public equities, you know, corporations like are extracting wealth from poor communities, from communities of color. That's how they're generating wealth in these big returns. And so you can look at repairs, returning that to working class communities of color, but you can also locate your specific history and story. So for example, my family grew wealth in Baltimore. And so when I was looking at what repair looked like, it involved both giving and investing in Black communities in Baltimore, even down to the specific neighborhood that I knew my family had grew wealth in and scooped it out, moved out to the suburbs. How could I invest in that community and Black leadership in that community? And then also this piece around this work of repair is not, it's not private work, right? Like I can't decide what reparations are as a white wealthy person. Like I can't do this work alone, and I need to be in relationship and in partnership, in accountable relationships where people can hold me accountable in order to do this work of repair. And so just really want to emphasize that you do not need to do this work alone, and you cannot do this work alone. You really need to be building like accountability and relationship. I think there's this thing where we're in this pandemic, you know, we're trapped in social media, but posting on social media is a start, but it's not going to redistribute wealth and power, and it's not going to build the relationships that you need to stay in this work for the long haul. And so I wanted to invite people into organizations that I know are doing this work so that you can be in community. I think for me, I really imagined accountability as just like a you know, for a while for me, it was just this inner critic being like, you need to do more. Can you imagine what, you know, this person would say about how little you're giving, or the percent of your giving tied to your total net worth? And it was so powerful for me to step into actual like loving, accountable relationships and be able to come into integrity. We all have so much to gain by coming into community and belonging together. And anything I left out, Tiffany, that you want to jump in on?
No, that was beautiful.
Yeah, so I'll share a link, and yeah, just wanted to offer all those pieces. I'm happy to like answer questions either now or offline about different strategies that we're using. And so we included this giving strategy, investing, coming into community, and an institution that Natural Investments loves and has a long partnership with is Self-Help Credit Union. And so we're really excited that Ebony Perkins is here to talk about the work of self-help and how they're investing in racial justice. So I'm going to pass it over to her.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Ebony Perkins, and I am from Self-Help Credit Union, where I am the Investor and Community Relations Manager. And I'm actually based in Durham, North Carolina. And I don't know if many of you have ever heard of self-help. Before I jump in, are we good with the slides? Or should I just keep going? Okay. So I don't know if many of you have ever heard of self-help, but we are actually a family of nonprofit organizations with the same mission of providing economic opportunity for all. We've been in existence for 40 years. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. And our organizations vary from having 2 separate credit unions, a state-based credit union and a federal credit union. And then we also have a ventures fund that allows us to make large risky loans. And then we also have an advocacy arm of our work that has really taken a huge stance against the fight against predatory lending. And we are fighting the good fight to try and prevent the communities that we've served for the last 40 years, which include low-income communities, communities of color, rural communities, and women from being targeted by unfair predatory lenders. When we started 40 years ago, we were this very small organization, and our CEO, who is our founder, he was operating out of the back of his Volkswagen. And now we've grown to having 2 separate credit unions with over, well, nearly 60 branches across 7 states. We have over 800 employees and now have $4 billion in assets. So we started pretty small and we've grown in quite a short time. But when COVID began to spread across our country, we knew that the communities that we serve would be drastically hit. There was no question about it. And we knew we had to do something. So we started the Community Recovery Initiative. And we responded in many ways to the needs of our communities and our borrowers and our members. And we became extremely flexible in order to work with our borrowers who may have started to lose jobs or started to experience negative things as the result of COVID. So we became flexible both with our borrowers, but also with our tenants in the real estate properties that we own across the country. And we've also started to begin to offer community recovery working capital loan in our branches to support businesses that are also in need in the communities that we serve. But one of the things that I think that we are extremely proud of and extremely grateful for the opportunity to offer is the Paycheck Protection Program. And I don't know if many of you recognize this title, but this is the PPP program that you may hear a lot about in the news that was passed through the CARES Act through Congress. And because of this, we are extremely grateful for this act because the PPP program allows organizations and institutions, businesses across the country to be able to provide at least 2.5 months of payroll for their employees. employees that wouldn't have been able to receive pay over the course of that time period because the country shut down. And so we're extremely grateful for the PPP program, but there was still some room for improvement with the way that the program is offered. One being that when it was first offered, and even now, in order to benefit and to support the financial institutions that were providing the loans on behalf of the SBA, there was an incentive, and the SBA and federal government offered to pay the financial institutions based on the size of the loan. So naturally, this left some of the people out of the equation who may not have had such a large business, or people who may not have had, who may not have needed large loans. And so during the first tranche of funds that were administered, a lot of the people that received the funds for the PPP program, they were lucky if they were the right size or if they had the right connections to the financial institution, which may not be the communities that we serve at Self-Help. So we took an active role at Self-Help, and we offered the PPP program to the communities that are most important to us. And instead of simply offering and making the loan available, Self-Help took an active role in providing that one-on-one service with these communities to help guide them through the process, to ensure that a lot of the applications that we submit would be approved. And so since April 1st, and one thing that we are super proud of our work, since April 1st, we have provided over 1,400 PPP loans to 1,400 different institutions across this country. This has totaled $171 million that will most likely be forgivable funds to these communities. We're excited because we have saved over 18,000 jobs. And 65% of the loans that we've made were under $50,000. If you remember what I just said and what I just highlighted, a lot of the people that were getting the funds from the first round were people that had organizations and institutions that were large, that were well known in our nation. But we took an active approach, and we specifically targeted the smaller businesses, the smaller organizations, to make sure that they weren't left out in the midst of all of this. We're also super proud to announce that 60% of the organizations that we supported were led and owned by people of color all across this country. And then finally, at least 66% of the funds that we've loaned have been made to nonprofit organizations. I think sometimes we often forget that nonprofits, they also serve communities that need help. And so we're all connected, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing the resources and the time, the energy, and just the expertise in order to help communities that have been impacted by COVID-19. And I'll move on to the next slide, because oftentimes I think people like to know, who are these people? It's easy. It is so easy to throw up a number, but it adds a little more oomph to something when you can see a face. So one of our first recipients for our PPP loan, since everything has happened this year, has been Kitty World Development Center, located in rural Windsor, North Carolina. Now, when we spoke to the owner of this child care center, simply put, she said, "I am so thankful we were allowed to get a loan." What she didn't share was that enrollment at this child care facility used to be 75 children before the pandemic, but it decreased to 50 as of the day that she received the loan. Now, the good thing is the facility never closed. They never closed because they were committed to supporting these families, because a lot of the parents of the children that they served were deemed essential workers. Their families and their parents worked in the nearby chicken factory to help all of us continue to eat well during this pandemic. Many of the families still worked at the local hospitals, and actually many of the parents worked in local nursing homes. So they were doing their part and able to, and really helping us continue to move forward and live during this pandemic. And we just felt that it was important to do ours. Oops, sorry guys, I set an alarm. Our next story that I wanted to share with folks, just so you're aware of some of the people that we were working with, is Grow Greater Inglewood. Grow Greater Inglewood is based in Chicago, and they are a social enterprise focusing on building an equitable and resilient local food system. They foster protections of vacant land in divested communities right on the south side of Chicago. And they focus on connecting with their local residents to teach them about the good food movement. And so they teach their folks where food comes from. They teach them how to grow it. They show them how it's done. And even more, they show them who profits off of it. They offer hands-on training and workshops to help people locally grow their own food. And then they also even have a food delivery part of their business as well. When all of this happened, right before COVID hit, they had plans to grow and to add 3 full-time employees. COVID threw a wrench in their plans. But thankfully, because of their relationship with self-help, they were able to receive that PPP loan, which hopefully will be forgiven, so that they were still able to add 3 part-time positions. No one was laid off. They were able to add new folks to their team so that they could continue to provide this important resource to their community, right on the south side of Chicago. Those are folks that we are super excited to help and glad to be a part of their story so that they can continue to make an impact in the communities that they serve. But as you know, a lot of the communities that we serve this year, they experienced a double whammy. And understandably, they are hurting and angry. And just like us at Self-Help, I'm sure you're probably hurting and angry too. Our CEO, Martin Eek, says, there is a time for rage and anger, which unlike numbness can be channeled into a recommitment to working for equality and justice. So I simply ask you today, how are you channeling your feelings? Consider joining our new community recovery initiative. We are committed to supporting underserved communities, but I'll actually change that. We are committed to serving underestimated communities. Communities who are experiencing the brunt of today's economic downturn. And we are pleased with what we've done, but we know that it's only a drop in the bucket. There is so much more that has to be done. And you can join us by simply placing a deposit with one of our credit unions, either Self-Help Credit Union or Self-Help Federal Credit Union. I often say, are you comfortable where your money sleeps? Is it doing the type of work that you want it to do? And this includes your cash reserves. So if you're questioning that right now, especially in today's times, consider placing a deposit with one of our credit unions. It can come in the form of a certificate of deposit, a money market account, or a traditional savings. I think you get to the opportunity to earn both a positive financial return as well as a social return because you're fighting systemic racism and you're working to narrow that financial wealth gap. The way I view it is kind of a win-win. But I'll say, and I'll emphasize what Tiffany said earlier. Self-help, although we're super proud to be a part of this fight, we are not the only ones that are doing this work. There are many community development financial institutions across this country that are serving underserved communities and underestimated communities. And I'm so excited that you highlighted, Runaway Project and Hope Credit Union and all of the other institutions that you mentioned, because they are also doing a lot of the same great work. We're all in this together. So even if you can't work with self-help, that's fine. Just make sure you do something. This is a team effort and we can't do it without each other. So thank you for this opportunity. More than anything, I did want to say a huge, huge thank you to Natural Investments. They have been one of our largest partners, and it's been more than an honor to work with this group of advisors because I feel it. Like I genuinely feel the authentic nature from the advisors to know that what they want to do good work, and more than anything, they want to educate their clients. And so I just thank you for your long-time support. And if there's ever anything we can do to help you, please let us know. But aside from that, do what you can. Communities are in need right now. There is a common saying that when America gets a cold, Black America catches the flu. And that has been evident a lot this year. Black America is suffering from the flu. And we need support in order to continue to make a difference and help folks during these difficult times. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ebony. We so appreciate, Ebony, your work, your voice, and the work that Self-Help Credit Union is doing. Thanks so much for everything you just shared. Now we want to turn it over to Sarah Loving, who is a research associate at Just Money Advisors. She'll be focusing on better banking options. We're so glad to have you, Sarah. And she's really the daughter of our advisory team at Just Money. That's Andy Loving and Susan Taylor. So welcome, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. I am Susan and Andy's daughter. I'm sure that's how you all would know me. But they brought me in 3 years ago to work on a project that they've been envisioning for a while. But it's essentially what we call better banking options. I feel like a lot of people, especially people in my generation who, I'm 25, just so everybody knows, who don't have much capital, who don't have much wealth to invest, they don't really like to think about the financial aspect of the fight against racism because they feel like they can't participate in it. But moving your money to a Black majority bank or a banking option that works with Black communities is something that literally everyone can do, regardless of how much money they have. And they will use those dollars, they'll leverage those dollars and use them to make wealth building loans, which, and these are loans that builds generational wealth, the kind of wealth that has been eluding and been taken away from African American or Black families for so long. But yeah, sorry. Yeah, we really encourage people in this time to move their money to a Black bank or credit union. But this is not the only thing we want people to do. This is in addition to, not an instead of. I feel like a lot of people, when looking at racial financial inequality, they like to say, oh, well, just move your money to a Black bank and then like to be done with it after that. This is just an easy step that everyone can take in addition to the other things that they're doing. So we have been highlighting minority depository institutions and specifically Black banks and credit unions on our blog and search engine the past few weeks. And I do want to reinforce that not all, all Black banks are good banks, but there are better Black banks. And we specifically look for ones that make those wealth building loans, the ones that these are housing loans and small business loans. And these allow Black families to have generational wealth, to build generational wealth. And in addition to not just looking at Black banks, which are specifically banks that have majority either ownership or membership, we also look at banking options like the ones we've talked about today, like Self-Help and Hope, who may not be technically majority Black, but still do incredible work in Black communities. So I'm just gonna share my screen and show y'all what we've been working on. We have developed a search engine And sorry, just a moment. We've developed a search engine with the help of Sebastian, who used to work at NI, and this basically enables anyone to find banking options in their area that make those wealth building loans. So I'm just going to show you how it works really quick. You can type in either your city, your zip code, or your county. I'm just going to type in Louisville because that's where we're based. And I can adjust my search radius depending on how far away I want to bank. Of course now, okay, there we go. And it'll give you a map. And our metric, which we've created in order to judge banks based on where they bank, where they are located, meaning that they are located in low income and moderate income communities, as well as making those wealth building loans. So this is, the Metro Bank was recently bought by Liberty Bank in Louisville, which hasn't been reflected in our data yet. But as you can see, you can get all of this information right here and score based on our metric to see who's doing the most quality loans in your area. And then you can click on the details page right here, do your own research if you are looking at eligibility requirements for credit unions. And it also shows the headquarters address. So yeah, this is basically just a resource that we've developed so that everyone can find a good bank and divest from the mega banks who are just so horrible about taking wealth from Black communities. And then we've also featured a list of Black banks and credit unions on our site. So this is a list of all of the Black banks in the US ordered by our metric, and they are all have remote banking. So these are options that literally anyone can move their money to today and start investing in Black communities. Thanks so much.
All right, well, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Ebony, Kate and Tiffany and Malika on the NI team. We now have time for some questions and Q&A. So feel free, you can either put your question in the chat box, you can wave your hand profusely, and we will unmute you if you want to just voice your question. So let's just start out. Does anybody have some questions that you'd like to throw out there? I see Diana. She's raised her hand.
Hi, Nicole. Hi. Thank you so much for all the resources that you shared. I've seen links, and I will admit wholeheartedly that I was taking pictures on my phone. What are we allowed to share with credit?
That's a good question. I think we would like you to share all the resources, all the links that we have risen in the presentation today. So everything in the chat boxes, everything in our presentations, yes, please, everyone feel free to share them widely. All right, let's see, what other questions do we have? Thank you for that question. We had another question from Dennis in Oakland, who asked about how, and this may be for you, Ebony, how self-help and folks in your industry, if they're continuing to reach out to Black-owned businesses and organizations that may not know that they actually qualify. Is that still happening, and how is that happening? for PPP, qualify for PPP?
Thank you. Yes, we are still doing it, and we are doing it actively. So experts are guessing that the funds will run out around June 30th. And so if you know of any folks, please, they can either contact us or someone else. Is Dennis in Oakland, you said? Or somebody else in Oakland?
Yes.
Dennis, we are based in Oakland too. And we have some folks that are working directly with Oakland residents and businesses. So please just reach out and we can connect you with whoever. But yes, the time is of the essence, but we're doing it.
Awesome. All right, we have another question in the chat box from Arionia, and hope I'm pronouncing your name okay. The question is, what advice would you give to a young Black female aspiring to be a financial advisor? Well, Malika, do you want to answer that question first?
Yes, although actually, I mean, you would be a great person to answer that question too, Nicole. Maybe we could both give a little piece on that. Let's see. I mean, I feel like the first thing is really getting into relationship with a support team, you know, support people, a mentor, another Black woman advisor who you meet maybe in a setting like this. Reach out, develop relationship, and, you know, begin to kind of get a sense of what the work is and what the steps are, and also build the relationships to support the work in the field. So that's one piece I have to add. What do you have to add, Nicole?
I would completely agree. I started my career in finance by being inspired by actually my dad, Dennis, who's a CPA in Oakland. I have two CPA parents, but he's the first person who told me what being a financial planner was. I actually never knew that. I think that it would have been great if I would have actually known what being a holistic financial planner was. And when I started out in the industry, I started out at a traditional financial institution, and you know, it would have been really great had I found people and found an advisor that I really aligned with in terms of my value system. And so I think that over my career as an advisor, it has been so helpful to find advisors and professionals who really align with you and your value system and want to support you and help you grow. And I'm happy to talk with you and share resources. So please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll put my email in the chat box as well. Tiffany, do you want to add anything to that as a Black female financial advisor? Okay. All right, let's see. What other questions we have going on? Anybody else has anyone else raised their hand?
We have a couple of questions for Sarah Loving, actually, about the Better Banking Options website. One in particular about how they develop their metrics, and the other is how are they sharing this information of this new website nationally for folks to hear more about it.
Well, honestly, the sharing part has been the part that since I'm like the sole director, I mean, my parents help and everything, but I'm the sole director on this project. So most of the outreach that we do is through the NI group. So if anybody wants to share on their social media pages or search engine, that would be super helpful, because we are trying to get it out there on social media, because we really want to reach specifically, or in my head, I'm trying to reach people of my generation who feel at a loss when it comes to contributing financially to a more just society. And as far as our metric goes, you can definitely check out how that was developed more in detail on our website. If you look at map.betterbankingoptions.com, there is a metric section. But we developed it basically when I was doing my own research, comparing banking institutions in particular cities when people would send me requests looking for the best banks in their area. So we look at banks that do a large amount of housing loans. We look at banks that do a large amount of small business and small agricultural loans, because these are the type of loans that these are wealth building loans, meaning that when you invest in objects, consumer loans, a lot of the time that investment degrades. Whereas when you invest in real estate and in business, that investment can become even more, it can build wealth for your family, and you can pass that down through generations. And then we also give a preference to banks that are located in low income and moderate census tracts, and as well as banks that have most of their branches in a central area and who are smaller, just because they tend to have a more intimate understanding of the local needs of the communities that they work in. But the main thing that we focus on in our metric that holds the most weight is definitely those, whether the banks are making quality loans. And we get all of that data, that's federally and publicly available data that we we have I'm not even sure how to explain it because I didn't even work on this part of the project, but it runs through our system and grades it based on our metric and presents you with the banks that are doing the most quality loans. I hope that answered your question.
Great. We have another question from Emily, who asked about IRA money and if there is a way to support, how socially responsible mutual funds are supporting and lending to Black-owned organizations. So maybe, Malika, maybe you can respond to that question.
All right, great, thank you. Yeah, I would definitely welcome any input from Michael too on this question. Michael Kramer, if you're on the call, I'd appreciate your 2 cents on this as well. But basically, many of the SRI mutual funds that we work with have really made a commitment to supporting basically social justice and economic equality. And so there are a range of them that have built in either community lending, community-based support within their investments. They'll place money, if it's an equity-based mutual fund, they'll place their cash portion in a community bank that's supporting community-based investing. And specifically, I can't think of right now of specific names. If you have anything to contribute specifically, if you've got some names on your fingertips, but this is something that we can add to our resource list and really highlight and point out those mutual funds that have really specific action in Black communities.
In the chat, James on our advisor team, James Frazier on our advisor team, lifted up CRA qualified and access capital. We at Natural Investments have within our model portfolios have built-in community investing in all of our model portfolios. And I know that we need to put the disclaimer out that we are not suggesting those for you because we are not giving you investment advice on this webinar, but do talk to a natural investment advisor if you have more questions to talk more about your specific situation. All right, let me see what other questions we have here in the chat. And Sylvia, please feel free to help me if I'm missing some questions here. There's so many lovely faces.
That might be it. We might have answered most of the questions.
All right, well, I think now is a great time for our last poll. And Sylvia, maybe you can actually help me do the poll question.
Here we go.
So based on this conversation we've had today, we'd love to see where you are at now, what you're inspired to do next.
And if there's other kind of specific actions or investments you want to make, shout them out in the chat, or if you want to flag opportunities for other folks to support local work or national work, you can shout them out in the chat too.
This is amazing. Excellent. Excellent. Well, does anyone have any final words before we say thank you and to have a wonderful day? We recorded this webinar, so we will be sending it out to all of you who registered for this so that you can share it with your friends and colleagues and family. And just watch it again for your own resource. And we look forward to connecting with you further. And let us know how we did today and what some other topics you might be interested in hearing about from our team at Natural Investments in the future.